And now we will jump to another level. We will jump to back to East Africa. Our last speaker today is Nomathemba Mhlanga, and she is Agribusiness Officer and Food System Focal Point in FAO's Subregional Office for East Africa. So welcome to share your perspectives on the future of food systems, Noma.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, SIANI, for inviting us to this platform. I want to mention that online I have two other FAO colleagues who have been very much involved in the food preparations towards the Food System Summit. Stephanie Galatova and Yegalem Verati. They will stay on for the Q&A session as I jump to another meeting. So just next slide, please. What I'm going to do through this presentation, given the focus of this meeting on Africa, is to really summarize some of the features, some of the highlights from the Africa Common Position on Food Systems, and then we'll touch on the transformational pathways that are envisaged by the continent. And then lastly, I will touch on the coordination hub, the UN coordination hub, and related initiatives that the previous speaker, Maria, also touched on briefly. So next slide, please. So what is the Africa Common Position on Food Systems? Basically, this is a synthesis report that summarizes expressed views, perspectives, as well as priorities, as well as ambitions by the African Union member states, 55 of them. This was a document that was authored and submitted before the Food System Summits in September. And what it does is that it identifies key features from the Africa food systems, but also how those food systems interact with the global food system, which I think was the intention of the Food System Summit. So the contents of this common position paper emerged from consultative and iterative processes within AU member states, and also contains inputs from specialized agencies, constituencies, which include think tanks, universities, research institutions, and policy networks in Africa. I think there are many, I saw Stephen Carr and there are other colleagues that participated in various dialogues that were organized to this event. So briefly, I just wanted to touch, and this follows nicely on the previous speaker's presentation, that for the continent of Africa, resilient and inclusive food systems not only are important for the achievement of the 17 SDGs of Agenda 2030, but they are very central and key to achieving the goals of Africa, the African Union's Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. These goals are basically pronounced in two key policy documents. The first one is the 2003 CAADP framework, which is the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, as well as Malabo Declaration in 2014, which then identified some key commitments for the continent. I'll just give an overview. This is not comprehensive. There's a full document that you can see online. But just to give an overview of Africa's food systems, as many of you already know, we still have challenges of food insecurity, high incidence of food insecurity in Africa. And but then on a positive note, we see that Africa's food systems are evolving towards intensified production to be able to address this SDG 2, particularly ending hunger. But it's still very dependent on food imports. 40% of the food consumed on the continent still comes from other regions, which is something that is really important to be addressed in transforming Africa's food systems. They are also shaped by the mega trends that are observed within the continent, namely the rapid urbanization. There is increased urbanization, the movement from rural areas to the urban areas in search of economic opportunities. Therefore, the food systems need to take this into account. And as FAO, we are really working on helping our member states address some of these issues on urban food systems. And then there is rapid economic growth. On average, African countries are growing at a rate of about 4.7%. This offers opportunities for the Africa food systems. as well as a youthful population, which can be an opportunity but also a threat to the food systems themselves. But sadly, I mean, this has been mentioned by the previous speakers, the food systems are not immune to climate change challenges. In East Africa at the moment, we are dealing with a very threatening drought here in Ethiopia, Kenya, and other parts of East Africa. The Sahel also has had similar incidences. And then, of course, they have been impacted negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. I just wanted to mention something which I didn't put in the slide, but to keep in mind that one key feature identified by the member states is the reliance or the role, prominent role that women play in Africa's food systems. So as I'm talking, we do, I mean, the continent does recognize the role that women play and is aware of the constraints, social and economic constraints that they face. So transforming Africa's food systems will need to really address this gender gap that exists within the continent. But now moving on to identifying some of the opportunities for transforming Africa food systems that have been identified by the member states. This includes, as I mentioned previously, this economic growth, which has led to increased incomes, which means translates to increased purchasing power for the consumers on the continent. And then we have the youth, which tech savvy and are willing to engage and innovate in this the food systems. The big topic, which I'm sure you've heard about in many fora, is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which is creating an opportunity for the continent to trade within itself as well as globally. And there are a number of protocols that are being developed, which will contribute to transforming Africa's food systems and hopefully increase self-sufficiency and lower dependency on imports. There are also value addition opportunities. The continent largely exports raw products, but there's increasing opportunities for processing, especially in the staple crops, and this owes mainly to the previous trends that I mentioned, such as urbanization and the growing middle class that are demanding some of these processed foods as their incomes increase. There's also a rising demand for animal source foods, and here let me tie in with the last point on the blue economy. There's recognized opportunities within aquaculture and the fishery sector that will address some of the nutritional challenges that the continent faces within its food systems. And lastly, the digital innovations that can enable this. Now, the previous speaker gave some of the figures which are on the right of the slide on the number of dialogues, participants, and pathways that have been generated by this Food System Summit. I think these are updated, more updated, but maybe not the latest figures. But just to say that even within the continent of Africa, this common position paper does identify pathways for taking the momentum beyond the summit. Already, I'm aware that the African Union Development Agency, AUDA NEPAD, has organized a meeting recently for the conveners in different African states to really try and identify key concrete actions that will be taken by countries to move this dialogue forward. In some instances, there is need to finalize the national pathways and then also to continue the consultations. Next slide, please. Then the previous speaker mentioned briefly the UN Food System Coordination Hub, which is being hosted currently by FAO and has as its membership the Rome-based agencies IFAD, WFP, as well as other UN agencies. And basically, I want to say that this hub is meant to serve as an independent point inside the UN system in relation to the food systems, as well as to the addressing the Agenda 2030. And this will focus really on delivery at country level. You can move to the next slide. This is just a schematic. The hub has 4 strategic objectives, which are mentioned in this slide. And as I say, it's not meant to replicate any other existing UN functions and capacities, but instead it is focused on leveraging the assets within the UN, and the hub will really rely on national governments taking the lead in addressing some of the priorities that have been identified already. And it will also serve as a unit for monitoring progress towards this decade of action. Next slide. This is more or less the same as the previous slide, but here what I've done is to also include additional initiatives that are ongoing that that are related to the food systems coordination hub. I will not also go into detail with that because of time. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there have been a number of questions that have been asked regarding this UN coordination hub. Tomorrow, which is a bit of a mistimer in terms of timing, because it would have been nice if it was done earlier, but I think opportunities for participants in this forum, there will be a comprehensive presentation which will go into detail about what this UN coordination hub will achieve. So there's been 2 sessions that have been programmed for tomorrow, depending on the preference and time zone and languages. I've shared here the contents of how you can register for sessions. I'm happy to take questions, and I would also like to welcome my colleagues Stephanie and Edalem to add Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, the links are in the chat as well. So if you want to register for this event, I will take a quick question for you, Noma, and your colleagues can continue also in the Q&A. What role do you see that regional networks play in the transformation of food systems from your experience?
Okay, yeah, no, I think they can play a very important role in bringing together different stakeholders. So I think one such example is NEPAD, which for the African region is already bringing together the different national conveners to share their experiences, but also to dialogue on identifying concrete actions on taking this forward, because at the end of the day, delivery is at the country level, and these regional networks, and including SIANI, what they can do is to really get these different stakeholders together and identify maybe additional players or institutions that can contribute meaningfully to tackling some of the identified country priorities. Thank you. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes. Thank you so much, Noma, and thank you so much for your contribution.